civil liberties are to people. I mean, they don't even think about these issues. Again, going back to Rhode Island's own history, think of all the rallies that take place at the State House, in the Rotunda. At least once or twice a week, you have these huge rallies, wonderful expression of free speech. What very few people realize, it's only because of an ACLU lawsuit back in the 1970s that a court ruled people had a right to use the Rotunda as a public forum for free speech. Mm-hmm. Again, go back to the 70s. It was an ACLU Rhode Island case. There needed to be a case to hold that married women had the right to use their birth name on their driver's license. They didn't have to use their husband's name. Courts had said, the DMV had said a married woman had to use her husband's name. So these are things we take for granted. We can rally at the State House. A woman has the right to use whatever name she chooses. It took lawsuits, ACLU lawsuits, to win those rights, and we forget about them. A great national example of that is back in the '88 election, Dukakis and Bush. Some of you may remember Dukakis said something about being a card-carrying member of the ACLU, and George Bush, the first, really ripped into him for that. And what was really ironic about that was at the same time that debate was going on, President Reagan was signing a law, the Japanese-American Internment Act, right, providing reparations to Japanese Americans who had been interned by our country during World War II. And President Reagan talked about, what a blot this was on our country and how important this law was. And again, it was the ACLU was really the only national organization at the time saying this is wrong. So what I like to say is, it's not that the ACLU was wrong all the time. It's just we're right about 40 years too early.
Well, and I love these kind of historical tendrils that all of these modern cases have. Like, for instance, Martin Luther King goes back to this, this anti-Semite that kind of formed the basis of these free speech laws. In the case of Citizens United, and, a lot of my friends on the liberal left, they can rant and rail against Citizens United all they want, but what they're not paying attention to is the 76 Supreme Court decision, Buckley v. Vallejo, which is basically the Supreme Court decision that said, yes, spending money does in fact equal free speech. Mm-hmm. And they don't seem to follow the historical tendrils back enough. Their issue is not with Citizens United, it's with that earlier Supreme Court decision.
That's absolutely true. I think also, the whole campaign finance thing is complicated. I don't want to simplify it or minimize, the concerns of some people about these issues. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're giving government the power to decide who speaks and who doesn't. And again, one of the little historical things that many people don't know, going back to the 1970s and the Buckley versus Vallejo case and the original passage of the 1974 campaign finance law, one of the first groups that was singled out for violating the law was the ACLU when it sought to print an advertisement in the New York Times criticizing the secret war in Cambodia. And because it used, I don't know whether it was President Nixon's name or somebody's name at the time, within the period, 90 days before an election or whatever the law said, the government was threatening the ACLU. So the ACLU, the New York Times, all these groups were really among the first to feel the sting of this new campaign finance law. I think that's an important history to keep in mind, that you're giving the government a lot of power if you say they have the right to control these things.
Right. Talk to us, in the few minutes, but going up to the break, about the Rhode Island chapter, how strong it is, its history, how long, and your tenure as executive director. Well,
the ACLU of Rhode Island was founded in 1959 by a number of people, but the leader was a guy named Milt Stanzler, who passed away a few years ago. He was an attorney, and he felt very strongly that Rhode Island needed a civil liberties union, and he helped put it together, and they were busy right from the start. They were very active in the 60s. There was a lot going on in the 60s, as you may know, and it's been going strong ever since. We've really been very lucky. I think some of the best attorneys in the state have volunteered their services to the ACLU. You know, the ACLU does not have any staff lawyer. All of our legal work is done by volunteers. And, you know, they've just done phenomenal work. They've handled lots of precedent-setting cases. They've spent literally tens and tens of thousands of hours volunteering their time to represent individuals. And I think we're very lucky to be able to get involved in as many areas of civil liberties as we do.
Well, I think the point has to be made that the ACLU, well, as in so much as it represents individuals, it really represents all of us.
Yes. One thing that, again, this is one of these cliches that some of us throw out, is that our only client is the Bill of Rights. And that's what it boils down to. We represent individuals to help vindicate those rights, but that's really what it's about.
Right.
By definition, do you consider yourself a strict constructionist on the Constitution?
It's sort of like conservative. It's one of these terms that can mean whatever you want it to mean. Mm-hmm. So you have. I think the beauty of our Constitution is that it's subject to lots of interpretation. Mm-hmm. It uses broad language, which allows it to adapt with the times. And while originalism is nice in theory, it can only get you so far. When you're talking about the internet and computers, to try to figure out what Madison or Jefferson would have thought only gets you so far. I think what you have to do is accept the underlying principles of the Bill of Rights, what they were trying to aim at, and use that. But call it strict constructionist or whatever. I think those terms have just lost meaning.
How many members are there in Rhode Island?
In Rhode Island, we have about 2,000, 2,500 members.
Mm-hmm.
One important thing to note, every once in a while we get a call, we handle a Cranston prayer case or something, and people say, I'm going to have all your government funds taken away from you. And that would be great. Unfortunately, we don't get any. Not that the government would ever want to give us any.
I recently saw there was a post on Facebook from some, Tea Party affiliate somewhere that was, like, sign this petition to remove all government funding from the ACLU. Yeah. And I had to laugh because, again, this is all, this is my $20 that I pay a year to be a member of the ACLU. And
yep.
I'll echo Michael Dukakis and say I am a card-carrying member of the ACLU. I never thought in my younger days that I would think that was an important thing, but like you said, the Bill of Rights is truly, I think, the ACLU's only real client, and I think that's more important nowadays than it has been. Well, it's always important, but we see so many kind of attacks on free speech, religion. Even gun rights, search and seizure. Mm-hmm. They're all in there, and we see these overreaches by the government, by law enforcement. In every culture, every neighborhood, every community. So the work you do is obviously really important to everybody out there.
How do you folks fundraise? I know a lot was made, particularly with some of the religious issues that came up, that somehow the ACLU was profiteering, holding up, searching for cases to make money.
Right.
If you could dispel that.
Sure. Well, first of all, most of our funds come from membership. We are. We don't get any government funds, at least not directly, and we rely on members to be a part of the organization. We hold fundraising events and things like that, but that's where the bulk of our money comes from. Now, it is true there's a federal law that was passed in the 1970s that allows parties who win civil rights cases against the government to recover their attorney's fees as a way of encouraging people to be able to vindicate their rights. It's not very helpful if you have to go into court to win a right to your freedom of speech, and you pay $50,000 for it to hire a lawyer, and that's the price you pay for winning your rights. So Congress, to its credit, they'd never do it these days, but in the 1970s they passed a law that says if you're successful in winning a lawsuit, a civil rights lawsuit of certain kinds, you can apply for a recovery of attorney's fees. And that's been very important to not just the ACLU, but to attorneys in being able to handle what can be very complex cases that take years and years to resolve. The important point to note is the fees only get paid if you win the case, which means somebody has violated your rights. And then we have a policy where the fees essentially get shared through a complex formula with the attorneys and the ACLU.
Right, and it stands that, in Rhode Island we're fortunate enough to have anti-SLAPP legislation in place.
Yes,
but,
again, something that the ACLU was very actively involved in.
Right, and if you're not familiar with SLAPP legislation, how would you best define SLAPP legislation?
I'm not sure I can simply define it. You may do a better job, but SLAPP legislation is a law that tries to protect individuals from lawsuits against people who want to prevent them from speaking. The best example is a case we handled. It was the first lawsuit brought under Rhode Island's anti-SLAPP law, and it had to do with a woman in North Kingstown. Her name was Nancy Shue Fleming. And she wrote a letter to DEM about raising environmental concerns about a landfill that was in the town. The owner of the landfill filed a lawsuit against her, a defamation lawsuit against her, for writing to her government officials. And the Rhode Island Supreme Court issued a very strong opinion saying the SLAPP suit law protected her. What it means is the lawsuit gets thrown out at a very early stage. So Nancy Fleming or anybody else doesn't have to spend the tens of thousands of dollars in a lawyer to defend themselves from what is clearly a frivolous suit and a suit designed to shut people up from speaking out on important issues.
Excellent. You are listening to the Coalition on Talk Radio on WPRO AM 630 on the FM dial, incredibly enough, on 99.7, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, our website, coalitionradio.us. We have the privilege of having Stephen Brown, Executive Director of the Rhode Island chapter of the ACLU, in studio live. We will continue to discuss our subject for today, why conservatives should kneel down and celebrate before the baby Jesus why we have the ACLU. Please stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few minutes from our wonderful sponsors.
The voice of Southern New England, WPRO, and Matt Allen.
We have Nick Mattiello telling the people of Rhode Island they got to get over it. We got to stop talking about this. Oh, really? No, Mr. Speaker. How about this? Let the investigation go forward on the House side. How about figuring out how it is the entire House of Representatives was lied to, including yourself, yet you're not upset enough to figure out how it happened? I'd like to figure that one out. I know you might look at this deal with the Paul Sox deal as a different thing, but you know what? Before that thing can be taken on, this other thing over here needs to be dealt with. And that's the fact.
Matt Allen, 6 till 9, after Buddy Cianci, and before John Batchelor, on the voice of Southern New England, News Talk 630 and 99.7 FM, WPRO. From the Seascape Lawn Care Weather Center, here's your exclusive AccuWeather forecast.
Mostly cloudy for tonight. Couple of showers around down into the upper 50s. Variably cloudy, much warmer tomorrow. Feeling like summer, the high 82. Mostly cloudy tomorrow night and Monday. Tomorrow night, 54. Monday's high 71. WPRO's exclusive AccuWeather. I'm meteorologist John Fear.
AccuWeather on the voice of Southern New England. News Talk 630 and 99.7 FM, WPRO.
The New England Cannabis Convention is coming to Providence May 16th and 17th. The cannabis industry will outpace the global smartphone market next year. So come and get expert advice from over 50 vendors, including doctors, growers, suppliers, dispensaries, and caregivers. 2 full days of panels and workshops, and the best smoking, vaping, and growing accessories available. Saturday and Sunday, May 16th and 17th at the Rhode Island Convention Center in Providence. Tickets are just $25 and can be purchased online at cannaticket.com. CANNA ticket.com.
Beacon Shipping Logistics will ship any car, any vehicle, anywhere in the United States with door-to-door service. Just call 855-3-SHIP-IT. They ship vehicles for thousands of auto dealers throughout the country, so you know you can trust them to provide the most reliable auto transport in the industry. And they offer open or enclosed shipping for your precious cargo. Did you see a car online and can't get there? Let Beacon Shipping ship and deliver it right to your door. Need to get your boat from West Palm to Warwick Neck? Beacon can do it. Call Beacon Shipping Logistics for transporting one car to an entire fleet. Call 855-3-SHIP-IT or beaconshippinglogistics.com for service that shines.